Welcome to The Point. I'm Anna Kasparian, the co-host of The Young Turks, and we have an excellent episode of The Point ahead for you. Later on in the show, we're going to talk about online dating. Is it still taboo? How many people lie on their profiles? And we're also going to talk about reality shows and whether or not they make us bullies. But before we get to that, let me introduce our excellent panelists for today. First, we have Malcolm Fleschner, the senior producer of this show, The Point. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us.
I am delighted to be here.
We have Desi Doyen, who is the co-host on Green News Report, which can be heard on KPFK here in Los Angeles and is syndicated on other stations throughout the country, which is incredible. She's also guest producing a nationally syndicated show, The Mike Malloy Show, this week. So thanks for taking the time to do The Point. I know you're very busy.
Yeah, but it was good. It's good to be here.
And last but not least, Lucas Lilieholm, the producer. He's making his debut here on The Young Turks, on The Point for The Young Turks Network, and he is the producer of The Young Turks on Current TV and also the online show as well. So thank you so much for joining us, you guys.
I should note that the reason I'm on the show is because we had another panelist cancel at the last minute who was going to be a Republican who was going to come and give a right-wing perspective on today's points, and she couldn't make it, so you're stuck with me. But I'll do my best.
The ideal example of personal responsibility is usually a conservative. So I'm glad that she showed us how responsible conservatives are by flaking on the show without giving us any notice ahead of time. But we're going to have a great panel today nonetheless. And I actually want to start off with a point that was submitted to us by Jerry Springer. Now, in this point, he gives us advice on what to do if our baby daddy ditches us for another woman. No, I'm just kidding. He's actually going to make a point about jobs here in the United States. Let's watch.
The great debate we're having in America is whether or not the government or the private sector should be providing jobs. It's not an either-or thing. Both have to do it. The private sector will never be able to provide all the jobs for Americans because the private sector exists to hire as few people as possible so the profit margins can be larger, to pay as low wage as possible so the profit margin can be bigger, to be able to hire people overseas because they're cheaper than American workers. So we know the private sector will do everything it can to get by with hiring as few people as possible so it can make a bigger profit. Knowing that, the government has to step in and make sure that there are jobs for all those people that aren't employed in the private sector. And that means jobs having to do with infrastructure, jobs having to do in the health industry. Any way that we can put people to work so that they can provide for their families is what we ought to be doing, and not worry about whether the job is private or public. As long as people are working, that's good.
Now, I love that point by Jerry Springer, and let me just note that he was on Current, and he made a lot of great political points, so I feel like he gets a bad rap for the show that he does. But Lucas, let me start off with you. What do you think needs to happen in order for economic recovery in this country? Do you think that we should focus on the private sector, the public sector? Should it be an equal mix of both? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the basic problem that we're facing right now is the lack of demand. And that is why no one is hiring people. So, you don't hire, he made the excellent point that you basically, if you're an employer, you wait as long as possible to hire someone new. So you only do that when the orders for your product, whatever it is, are exceeding what your workforce can produce. And basically what we have right now is the private sector is not basically having enough people to sell to. So we need the government to step in and kickstart the economic cycle. And I think that's basically when the private sector can't fill that demand, you need the government to step in. And that's kind of basic economics that we've had for the last 60, 70 years.
Now, Desi, wouldn't you argue that we need the public sector for more than that? I mean, there are certain elements of society where the public sector makes much more sense than the private sector. Just one thing that comes up at the top of my head is our prison system. Usually, if you have a private prison system, they have an incentive to lock away as many people as possible for nonviolent offenses. Are there other examples you could think of where the public sector makes more sense than the private sector?
Well, absolutely. Let's look at the military. The military, that is a government, socialist government program that we have that employs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, not just directly, just by hiring of people directly in the military, but also from the indirect jobs that come from that as well. So I don't think you can really separate the government out of the public sector, out of the private sector. They actually have to go hand in hand. It seems like they really need to work together. And when there is no demand, like we've had with the Great Recession, then somebody has to step in. The demand, the buyer of last resort becomes the government in this case. That sort of provides the funding and that bridge between the recession and bringing receipts back up again for private sector. You know, if there's no demand, then somebody's got to step in and do it. Otherwise, we get collapse, and nobody wants that.
You know, Malcolm, another aspect of that video that I loved was that he talked about profit motive a little bit, right? And he talked about a lot of these companies hiring employees and basically making one employee do the job of several other employees because they want to save as much money as possible. They want to protect their bottom line. At the same time, these companies are getting huge tax cuts because they are the so-called job creators. What are your thoughts on that?
What I think that Jerry doesn't say, but I would say if I were a Republican, which I'm sitting in for a Republican, is that the private sector needs to have confidence. They're always talking about confidence. We need to have more confidence to hire, and we can't be confident because there are too many regulations, or we don't know what regulations the Obama administration is going to. I mean, any day now, there could be a whole slew of new regulations, and there goes our profit motive. And it makes no sense to me because, as Lucas pointed out, I think if there is a demand for your product, you are going to hire more people to satisfy that demand. That is very basic.
That's all the confidence in the world you need.
Yeah.
Knowing that someone is going to buy your product.
That's a lot more confidence than you need than worrying about what theoretical regulations the Obama administration is going to put in place, which I don't think they really are anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Also, there's been a lot of surveys done recently that, that they survey small business owners, they survey big business owners, and they all pretty much say that they are not actually concerned about regulations. New regulations, old regulations. Regulations don't even fall on the list at all. What they're concerned about is demand. If there's nobody there to buy their stuff, if people are out of work, they're not getting paid. If they're not getting paid, they don't have money to spend. If they don't have money to spend, they're not buying anything. They're basically holding on.
I just think this whole argument about how regulation gives people an incentive to not be entrepreneurs is ridiculous, or not run their business or hire jobs. It's ridiculous. I think about it in our terms with the Young Turks, right? And would regulation stop us from doing what we're doing? Right? If we had to pay higher taxes, are we just going to close up shop and stop doing what we're doing? No, that's not the case at all. And by the way, the lack of regulation is precisely the reason why companies like Ford are spending $1 billion in countries like China to build new factories. Those factories should be built here in the United States, where we gave companies like Ford a bailout. So the way that we give people or companies and corporations incentives to outsource jobs, to not create more jobs, to basically hoard their money into their bank accounts and not give people new opportunities, even if the economy is not so great. We are giving them the ability to create new jobs with these tax cuts, but they're not doing it.
And the corporations are sitting on a hoard of cash right now. This is also very well known, that
That's
they're
the
not
key.
using this to hire more people. The banks are not using this to make more loans to small businesses. They're sitting on this cash. I think they're sitting on it to wait out to see what happens, to see what they can squeeze out. If they just hold it just a little bit longer out, then maybe they can actually get a little bit more.
Yeah, there is not a lack of cash on hand, and I think that's where there's an element to this that is a little different than anything we've experienced in since basically the Great Depression, which is the degree of income inequality and wealth concentration. So I think that part of the problem is there just is not the purchasing power in the middle class to buy the goods that our economy is capable of producing, and that basically in the last 20 or 30 years, all of our economic expansion has been financed by debt. And that basically now we're in an overhang where the middle class is in a huge degree of debt, so there isn't any money to kind of kickstart that recovery again. And we need, I know it's taboo to say.
More debt?
No, we need wealth distribution. We need a redistribution of wealth to diversify it into the economy, because that strengthens the overall economy. It makes it more stable because you have less speculation, and it puts purchasing power back into the most number of households that you can.
If I were actually a Republican, there'd be steam coming out of my ears, and I'd be, income redistribution, how dare you suggest such a thing? No, the market should control everything. And if Jerry Springer is saying we need more infrastructure in this country, well, if the market demands it, if the market wants us to fix bridges, if the market wants us to, fix our highways and take care of our sewage systems that are 80, 100, 150 years old, well, then the market will take care of that. And if it doesn't, well, so some people fall off, the bridges collapse. I mean, You can't make an omelet without some people falling off of bridges.
But the market can't function without an infrastructure to support it. You can't ship things anywhere across the country if
Yeah,
there's
good
no
luck
rail
without that
lines, there's
highway
no
system.
roads.
Well,
You
if
need
there's a
that
demand for
infrastructure
it,
in
then
place.
companies will move in.
Well,
and
That sounds great in sort of this ideological world, but in reality, it doesn't actually happen.
Well,
It
this is-
never happens.
It
this is-
doesn't. I mean, a perfect example of that would be like the potholes on Wilshire Boulevard. Like Wilshire Boulevard, that'll get you to Beverly Hills, the richest area in Los Angeles, right? How come no one's fixing that? Los Angeles is bankrupt. They don't have the money to fix it. Are the wealthy people paying to fix it? No, they're not paying.
But are the roads in Beverly Hills nice? That's the question, aren't they? Right?
I guess, I guess in certain enclaves it's fine, but it's
In the
a,
gated communities, the roads are.
But you know,
Private
there's
roads.
Malcolm actually makes a decent point there, because you will have wealthy people in this country now who are hiring their private security because they know that our police enforcement is being defunded. Places like Camden, New Jersey are seeing an increase in crime because they don't have money to pay their police officers, so people are getting laid off. So there's something to be said about that, because I feel like the top 1% in this country will hire their private security, and they'll do what they need to do to live in their bubble of ultra
They'll be
wealth.
fine.
And they'll be fine, exactly.
Absolutely. They don't have anything to worry about. But that's where I think we're also kind of approaching a pivotal point where we have taken the idea of individualism, of being in it for yourself, to kind of an extreme. And we need to decide whether we want to have a society where everyone's got buy-in. Because if we don't, then basically that's what we're going to have is kind of feudalism. We're going to have gated communities where all of the wealthiest people live and everybody else is kind of screwed, which I guess is nice for them in their gated community, but it also means they're going to be terrified to leave there. They're going to have to live in these.
There won't be anybody there to buy the stuff that their employees produce from their companies.
Yeah.
If there's nobody to buy your things, if you're some rich guy who's made a lot of money off of making widgets, if nobody can buy your widgets except someplace else out of the country, you know, that's your best luck that you can get. And in the worldwide recession we have right now, you know, they're hollowing out their own future income.
Absolutely, and I think that's Nick Hanauer got he was the one that did the TED Talk that was sort of censored because it was too controversial on
It was
economic.
banned for a day.
Yeah, on economic topics. But basically what he is saying, and I completely agree with this, is in some ways President Obama making the argument of fairness for greater taxation is missing the point. Because if you want a functioning economy as in the manner that we saw since World War II, you need a broad middle class with good purchasing power. So the argument should be, if we want a healthy economy, we need a greater distribution of wealth. It's not, forget fairness. Fairness is great, but that's not even the argument. If you want the market to function, you need to have cash more
You need to have
equally
full
distributed.
participation.
Exactly.
As far across as possible. People need to be paid enough to be able to participate in the
But that
economy.
was the theory. I mean, we have Henry Ford's theory was, or so I've heard, that he said that he wanted to pay his workers enough that they could afford to buy his products. And I think that's what built the middle class in this country, is that we had the vast middle people who had enough income where they could afford to buy the products that the rich were selling them. And the rich had a vested interest in all those middle class people being able to buy their products. But now that we live in an integrated global community, the rich, the wealthy, the corporations don't have that vested interest in a middle class in America because they can sell their products to the middle class in India
very
and the
patriotic
growing
of them.
middle class. Well, but our system is not based on patriotism. Our system is based on talking about patriotism and
Good point.
then not really caring. And so we have a system set up where the people who are supposed to be doing all the hiring, all the job creators, my people, because I'm a Republican, because I'm sitting in for Republican, in theory, it's going to work the way it worked before, but they don't care about that anymore. They're happy to sell their products in China and India to the burgeoning middle class there. And without that vested interest, we need to step in, the public sector needs to step in, as Jerry pointed out,
Right.
But persuading those people to invest in that when they don't have a vested interest financially, that's a tough sell, especially when Obama is, a socialist.
Now, I'll let Malcolm take that last point for this topic. And I will say, Malcolm, you are playing an excellent Republican on the show.
I'm going back and
making
forth.
the common douchey arguments that a Republican would make. Now, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to move on to lighter topics, including online dating. Are you online dating? And are you lying on your profile? You probably are. We'll be back. Welcome back to The Point. Our next point has to do with online dating, a topic that I think is fascinating because I think that people are completely changing their take on online dating, but we'll get to that discussion in a second. But we have a dating expert by the name of Julie Spira who talks about how people lie on their profiles. Let's watch.
Hi, I'm Julie Spira. I'm an online dating expert and I coach singles on how to find love on the internet. And I'm also the author of the bestseller, The Perils of Cyber Dating, Confessions of a Hopeful Romantic Looking for Love Online. My point today is I believe there needs to be truth in advertising on online dating profiles. And that it's not okay to misrepresent yourself or lie about, simple things to serious things on your profile. So who's lying about what? The guys are typically lying about their height if they're short, and they might add 1 to 3 inches to their height. They might lie about their income. Let's say it's the last job they had before the economic turndown. Often their marital status. Yes, it's true. There are married people pretending to be single online. And laugh it or not, they lie about their hair color. They'll say their hair is still brown from their high school yearbook photo when in fact they have turned a few shades of gray. So what are the ladies lying about? It's a known fact that lots of women lie about their age and their weight. Age typically 5 to 10 years. Weight about 8.5 pounds is the average amount of weight that people take off of their body. Also women, they post photos that are fairly old and sometimes they're not recognizable. Shame on them. And the sad part is sometimes they will actually lie and not disclose the fact that they have children. So where do we draw the line between a little exaggeration about a few pounds here and there and actually lying about your marital status? Should someone who's actually separated, divorce pending, list their relationship status as single or divorced? My book, The Perils of Cyber Dating, will help you spot some of these red flags in these dating profiles and help you have a better dating experience. For more information, you can find me at cyberdatingexpert.com, and I certainly hope you follow me on Twitter at Julie Spira, where I talk about the marriage of love and technology, and also about my new book, The Rules of Netiquette, How to Mind Your Manners on the Web, at rulesofnetiquette.com.
Now, as I watch that video, I think of what I would write on my online profile, and my strategy is to set the expectations low. So I would age myself, I'd put on a few pounds. That way when the guy actually meets me, I know that he will be pleasantly surprised, right? But what do you think, Malcolm? I mean, it baffles me that people lie on their profiles when they know that eventually they're gonna meet this person in person.
Yeah, well, I like your strategy because it's a good approach for never having to go on any dates.
No, but I would assume that there will be someone out there who'd be willing to date you, and then you know that they would like you regardless of what you look like, right?
Well, if you're going to say on your profile that you're morbidly obese and you're going to attract interest from someone who really likes that, and then you show up and it's you. I mean, I like the idea of somebody who's really into that, and you show up and like, oh.
Boy, we'll take it. Yeah.
I guess
girl again.
I got to sit through this meal with her. And I'm really thinking about, But I think it is curious because yes, they're going to find out. Presumably, I mean, you want them to find out. You want them to see you and meet you face to face. But I think it has to do with our capacity for self-delusion. And my hair is starting to go gray, but I can certainly pretend like these flecks are, they're just blonde. There's some leftover. I was blonde when I was a baby, so they must be coming out again or something. People will, when you're trying to put yourself out there, you want to put your best face forward, literally. And I think people are willing to shade that in their own minds, and then it comes out on their profile.
That's an excellent point, because some people might live in their own little bubble where they think, yeah, I got it going on. Like, that scale's broken. Okay, I'm definitely 10 or 15 pounds thinner than that. But Desi, what do you think about the taboo attached to online dating? Do you see it changing? Online dating's been around for a while now.
I think it's absolutely changing, and I think that's a good thing because sort of for so long we've all been stuck within these arbitrary social norms, and now we don't have to be stuck within that. Women have more control, men have more control over who they choose to meet and who sounds interesting to them. They're not just left with whoever's at the bar bar or whoever they happen to stumble across in their daily life. And and the other thing I think about the lying, it's not really that bad. When you meet somebody at a bar, they can certainly lie to you about what they do, how much they make, where they've been, how old they are, whether they're married or not. All of that stuff they can lie about, and you still wouldn't know the facts on that until you got to know them later. So it's really not that much different from meeting somebody in person. It's the only thing they can't lie about is their height and their weight.
But you can still lie about it. Why not?
Well,
yeah,
sure.
I'm 6'4", sure. Yeah. What? You're telling me I'm not?
You got a tape measure?
But doesn't the internet add an extra layer to that? Because of course you meet people at a bar and they will, puff themselves up and say, yes, they'll find euphemisms for what they do, and that's fine. But with online, or with the internet, you can lie about a lot of things, including your gender. What do you think about that, Lucas?
Well, I think there's sort of two pieces to misrepresenting yourself online. The first is that in some ways, I would think that it winds up making you a lot more nervous when you go to the date for the first time, because you're going to be thinking, God, what if they immediately notice these discrepancies? And the last thing you want to be is additionally nervous when you're going on a first date or first meeting someone, because it's hard enough as it is. So it seems like in some ways you're almost sabotaging yourself. But then the other part is, if you have made assertions about yourself that the person you're meeting can tell are not correct at the very outset, I mean, that sends up some serious warning flags that it's like, I don't know this person at all yet, and so far, the only thing I know is that they've already lied to me. I understand where that comes, where, wanting to misrepresent yourself maybe a little bit comes from, but in some ways, I do agree that being honest is the best policy, because it's going to make you more at ease. If you're being honest, you got no story that you need to maintain.
Well, isn't there a difference between presenting your best self or your idealized self rather than, I'm really sloppy and I don't clean up my room or something like that?
Yeah, the first thing you're going to do is present all of the aspects of your personality that are delightful. So when I think about myself, when I'm hungry, I'm grumpy, right? Am I going to include that in my profile? Am I going to talk about how I'm a raging bitch when I have a huge time crunch and people are trying to talk to me at work and I'm trying to do something on my computer? No, I'm not going to talk about that.
I'm sorry, okay? We had to prepare for the show. Yeah.
I'm going to talk about how I'm a co-host on the largest online news show in the world. I'm going to talk about how, I don't know, what else? What else is great?
This only extends to the physical realm, but that's what's interesting to me is the statistics that she mentioned in there as far as people misrepresenting their height or their weight. Some of those things you may be able to tell, especially if it's a drastic, difference between what this person said. And I mean, to me, if I were to be meeting someone immediately, it's like, well, I already feel like you were dishonest to me and I haven't even had a conversation with you yet.
But maybe that's the difference. Maybe you're not meeting them directly, immediately. Maybe you have time to get to know them, and so you get to have that fantasy of,
I can lose the weight.
I can lose the weight. Or once they get to know me, then they'll like me and they won't mind those extra 5 pounds, or that I'm not really 6'5".
I think that's what it is, because it reminds me that you hear about like actors when there's a job or there's they're looking to cast someone who. The casting agent says, "Can you ride a horse?" The answer is always yes. Whatever it is, can you do whatever? They always say yes.
And you'll find a way to make it happen.
And then I'll learn to ride a horse, or once they've hired me and they're screwed, they got to take me. So I think you're telling yourself, well, just get me in the door, and then I'll win them over with my charm and my personality, and that ever worked for me, but in theory, you can tell yourself, like, I'm a worthwhile person, I'm fun, I'm good looking, maybe not, it doesn't come across in my recent photos, but that you can tell yourself that you can win the person over if you just get face to face, but you need to, polish this, not turd, but
put some lipstick on that pig.
Yeah, exactly. You want to put your, even if it's not the best foot forward that you can realistically depict yourself as, then you'll do that just to get face-to-face with someone so you can win them over that way.
That's a really interesting strategy, and I think that it works maybe 10% of the time. Because I think, look, here's the reality. People obsess with the way someone is portrayed on these sites, right? They will go through the pictures. Let me share a personal story that I will probably regret later.
Great.
But there was like a 3-month stretch where I was single, and I know, it was horrible. No, it was, but I thought, you know what? there's Match.com. Let me try it and see what happens. And there was this one guy that I thought was cute. He had one picture, and it was one of those pictures from a really strange angle where you can't tell if he's good looking, but I read his profile and I thought it was interesting. I emailed him and I said, hey, why don't we get together, whatever. And he said, I'm surprised that you actually contacted me. I purposely only put one strange picture of me because I don't want someone contacting me because they're superficial. And he's like, I gotta be honest, I've been on this site for a month and I only get a few people asking to meet with me. So people are obsessed with that, right? And when it comes to lying, it totally makes sense to me. And just to read some statistics that you talked about a little bit in your answer, Lucas, on average, both men and women exaggerate their height by 2 inches. People are on average 20% poorer than they claim to be, while men typically exaggerate their incomes by a bit more than women. And also, the more attractive the picture posted online on a dating site, the more likely it is that it is out of date. Okay, so it's an old picture. And female online daters were more likely to lie about their weight, 59% of them, followed by height, 42% of them, and age, 13% of them. Male internet dating profiles were most inaccurate about height, 61%, followed by weight, 55%, and age, 24%.
Interestingly, the men are more likely to lie about their age than the women are. Only 10-13% of the women were going to lie about their age.
Yeah, that was extremely surprising to me. I would assume that the women would lie about it. But maybe they're taking Lucas's advice and saying, look, I don't want to set the expectations too high and be nervous when I actually meet this guy.
Right, and men are lying about their cup size.
If there was an entry for that, I'm sure they would.
Well, there's also what kind of lies are unacceptable. She talked about people who are separated, not yet divorced. Should they say that they're separated, not yet divorced? And I can see where you might choose not to do that on your profile, not to give out that much information about yourself to see if you get a hit and then try from there. But I would see it as being an absolutely unacceptable lie to be somebody who's married, has no plans of divorcing, but you're on a dating site and you say you're single just because you want to go.
Well, let's not judge. Let's not be too hasty.
Interestingly enough, on The Real Housewives of New York, there's this one character on that show who wears a prosthetic leg. And she talked about how she went on a date with a guy. She really liked him. They were smitten. 4 dates in, she realized, oh my God, I haven't told him that I wear a prosthetic leg yet. And then when she did tell him, he ran for the hills. So when it comes to online dating, when you, that is horrible. That is horrible. Okay. But when it comes to certain situations like that, I think online dating can make it a little more complicated because you don't want to outright say, hey, I have a prosthetic leg, but at the same time, is that considered a lie? Is that a white lie? Is that a big lie? Is it something that you should tell the person immediately after you meet them on a first date? I mean, we obviously don't have that problem, but I think it goes to what you were saying, Desi, about how there are certain things that you can probably get away with not sharing on that online profile.
Right away.
Right
you
away.
have to do it eventually again with the idea that, they have this idealized Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan, you've got mail thing where once you find out who they are, then it'll be okay. It'll be all right. They'll love you anyway.
And I think if you do have something to disclose, along those lines or something, I think also don't roll it out like you just got diagnosed with cancer. Don't because if you come across telling this person that this is a horrible thing or that this is a huge defect, that's how they're going to interpret it. So at least try and be kind of positive about it. Show that this is not something that defines your life or something. But don't roll it out as like, all right, I have to tell you something. It's a huge drag, and here it is. Because that's exactly how they're going to interpret it.
I want to hear how you roll out the good side of herpes.
Yeah, well, so there you go.
Lucas, final question for you. I'm curious to see what you have to say about this. When it comes to online dating, would you argue that it's empowering knowing that you have this tool as a professional? Because a lot of people these days are working more than 8 hours a day, and you have this new tool. So do you think that this has something to do with this taboo kind of dwindling down to no longer existing?
Totally. I mean, I think ultimately the idea of online dating is a great idea because, actually finding someone that you like is hard enough, and then putting in the time to go on, 3 or 4 dates to the point where you might find out that this is not someone who has a personality that you maybe like or whatever, that's a big amount of investment. And basically what a dating site is just a filtering process. Mm-hmm. So you're just filtering through people until you get to a subset that is going to have a much higher proportion of people that you're going to hit it off with. So it may not be the first one, but you're much more likely to. You're going to have to spend a lot less time sifting through people, as it were. You know.
What a romantic.
So I think it's.
We have a Mr. Romantic over here, Lucas.
But it's realistic, I think, and I like it. I like knowing that if I become single, there's like this huge database of men that I can access at my convenience and go out on dates. Like, honestly, I'm being realistic with you guys. There's something empowering about that. Not having to go to a bar. It's crowded. There's music. There's guys rubbing themselves against you. Like, I don't want to deal with any of that.
Why is there a taboo anyway? I mean,
Yeah.
I understand why it was there in the first place, but now why is it still a problem?
Yeah, I actually don't think it is anymore. I think that taboo has kind of lifted.
It's totally normalized now.
I think so too.
I think it's getting there, but I think that any degree of taboo there has to do with a romanticized version of what love was in the past anyways. But a lot of people wound up in marriages they didn't like, and just the fact is getting divorced was a much more taboo thing to do, 50 years ago or something. So I think people think of person-to-person sort of happenstance meeting as the best way. But I think that is just, like I said, it's an idealized sort of heightened version of what happened in the past. And I don't think it actually is the way it was.
Happens in books and movies, not so much in real life.
Exactly.
Well, if we lie on our online profiles, dating profiles, we can always lie later on about how we met. Make it up. Why not? It starts with lying, it ends with lying. It's a nice through line to have.
Wrap it up in a nice little package of deception. All right, guys, we got to take a quick break, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. So leave some comments in the comment section, share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them. And let's take a quick break. When we come back, we have more awesome topics, including reality shows. Okay, this is something that I think is interesting. It's a new social phenomenon, relatively speaking. Do reality shows make us bullies? We'll discuss that when we come back. Welcome back to The Point. The always classy Spike TV is coming out with a new reality show called The World's Worst Tenants. And they're basically focusing on evicting people. And the evictors are the real heroes in this show. Let's watch a trailer.
Yesterday, we visited a boxing gym that had a lot of reports of injuries to make sure that the tenant had the owner's name on the insurance. Since most of these injuries are happening after business hours, we're going back tonight to surprise the tenant and find out what's really going on. Freaking fights! Bare knuckle boxing is illegal. Guys are going to get seriously hurt or killed.
Now, when I say that this is a reality show, I use that term loosely because in reality, these are reenactments, but we don't even know if these situations took place anyway. And by the way, this is just one example of the show. There are actual episodes where they evict people who can't pay their mortgage, people who have several tenants living in the same apartment because they don't have enough money to afford their rent. So this is something that I find interesting because you're seeing more and more of these shows where you have train wrecks, sideshows, people that we can kind of point and laugh at and feel better about ourselves. Desi, do you feel like this social phenomenon has kind of turned us all into bullies?
Well, I don't think it turned us into bullies any more than we already were, perhaps. I think this is something that has been going on for centuries. Obviously, the bread and circuses in Roman times, keeping the people entertained so that they didn't notice that they weren't making enough money to get by. We do have this dark human nature that likes to see these sort of train wrecks. There's Schadenfreude that is obviously at work here when people watch to enjoy, take pleasure in, laugh at people's really bad circumstances. It gives you an opportunity, like with the old soap operas, to say, oh, look how horrible that is there. That's not me. I'm glad that's not me. Look how great I'm doing. I get to be self-righteous. But, they're not all bad. Some of them actually turn out to be pretty well. You get to see people overcome their circumstances.
Really?
So, there are a few that do that. There are a few reality shows that are actually quite informative about worlds that you might never get a chance to see. Like there's a reality show about little people, for example. Another one about the Amish, about Amish living out in the world. So you can see in some of these cases, you can get more information about what that world is like. But in most of these other ones, it's total misery porn, complete misery porn.
Right. Now, I know that some uplifting reality shows exist, but when it comes to the reality shows that do the best, the reality shows that get all the attention, what comes to mind? The Real Housewives, Jersey Shore, Hoarders. Hoarders is ridiculous. ridiculous. I mean, we are basically pointing and laughing at people who have a severe mental disorder that causes them to live in filth. Lucas, why do you think these shows are so successful? What does that say about the country? Especially in economic times like these, by the way.
Well, kicking people out of their homes who can't afford to pay. There's nothing too appealing about that. Something like where someone is doing something illegal in a building that someone else owns. I can kind of see that. It feels like a righteous-ish thing to be doing, to be getting rid of them. But I think maybe it is a way for us to kind of see these people, some individual who kind of represents to us an aspect of the culture that we don't particularly like, and we can see because obviously reality TV selects out for the most extreme cases, but it allows us to kind of paint with a broader brush for other people that we perceive to kind of fall into that category as well. So maybe in some way it kind of helps us to write off some of the issues that we see in the society at large.
Malcolm, do you feel at all that we might be living vicariously through some of these characters? I mean, obviously not hoarders, but when people watch Jersey Shore, do you feel like it brings out their inner rebellious youth that wants to go out drinking and flashing people in public? Is there an element of that?
Well, I mean, I don't need to, because I have the same, my abs look just like the situations. It's really uncanny. You'd know that if you'd read my online dating profile. I don't know. I think that one of the arguments, and I'm supposed to play the Republican, so I'll try to do it. One of the arguments in favor of these types of shows is that they depict a world that you're supposed to see and then say, oh, I'm not gonna be like that. You see The Biggest Loser and these huge fat people who might appeal to some people in online dating, I know, but for the most of us, not. And you say, okay, it's gonna discourage me from getting fat like that, or I'm gonna lose weight because, oh my God, if I look like that, I gotta lose the weight. I don't really think that's the case, but for me with these shows, I don't know how much of it is us just liking to see human misery. I think that may be true to some extent, but I think mostly it's just that they depict drama, and it's dramatic. These, seeing a Hoarders, I haven't watched a whole lot of Hoarders, but when you see an episode of Hoarders or some of these shows, there's high drama. And the same thing with soap operas. We like to see dramatic situations, and especially when people overcome those circumstances. I think that's really popular, when they lose the weight on The Biggest Loser. So I'm not willing to paint such a broad brush, say, oh, we're all horrible people for watching these shows, because I think they have a really mixed appeal, and some people may appreciate just pointing their fingers and laughing, but other people might say, you know what, I like to see the triumph of the human condition sometimes.
I have to be completely honest, and I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea to think that I don't enjoy reality programs. I watch them all the time. After a 12-and-a-half-hour day here at work, talking about politics, Mitt Romney's gaffe, Obama's gaffe, all of this nonsense in the political world, I want to shut my brain off and watch something mindless. So I think that there's also an element of that, where Americans are drowning in their own misery with this economy, unemployment. We have these clown politicians right now that aren't really doing anything about the real issues we have in this country. Sometimes we want to turn our brain off, and we want to consume whatever, someone else's stupidity, and just kind of laugh at it and call it a day. So I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, but there are certain shows where I would say that it makes us bullies to watch it and enjoy it, and Hoarders would be one of them. And I don't know if that's too judgmental, but I just see that happening. Also, Lucas, what kind of impact do you think this has on young people? Because, people will make the argument about video games, for instance, and they'll say, oh, video games are making the youth violent, but studies have shown that they really don't make young people violent. But do you think that with reality shows and some of the shenanigans that people in the Jersey Shore get into, would that influence young people to also act that way? Because think about it, they've become tremendously wealthy by acting that way.
That's true. I think certainly there are some people that will probably be influenced by that. And the unfortunate thing is, a show, I know we've talked about it on the Young Turks, a show like Teen Mom, if you're a young girl that is looking for a lot of attention or something.
You want to get on TV?
Exactly. What's messed up is, and this would not apply, I think, to most people, but to the people that are going to be, drawn to the appeal of that. it incentivizes messing yourself up or messing your life up as much as possible, because you got to be the most messed up person that they come across for them to make the show about you. So I think it definitely can have that effect for some people. I don't think young people at large are, but certainly some of them are.
Well, I also think that there should be a little bit of responsibility that goes to the companies that are producing this kind of programming. Mm-hmm. It used to be that there wasn't this kind of programming. It was more involved in scripted work, where you actually had to hire people, have a crew, hire writers. And they're moving away from that because that's really expensive. And reality programming is much less expensive. I mean, I think one of the examples that I saw online, you could basically take a couple of people who are having a really bad day, take them out in the alley by the dumpster, and there's your set, there's your crew, there's your cast, and you don't have to put any money out for that. It's low risk, high reward potentially. It costs them almost nothing. It's sort of quintessentially American. You know, you've got this something for nothing with the production companies. They put out very little, they get a lot back, and you know, who cares what they put on TV?
That's exactly the case. I feel like in a lot of ways, our entertainment has devolved, but we're consuming more and more of it because we're amused by it. And it's just a really interesting phenomenon as of late, and people are loving it. You know, you see shows like Fear Factor. How many seasons of Fear Factor are there gonna be where they're drinking like a rat smoothie? And it's just incredible. So people are really into that. Now, real quick, I don't want us to seem like, and I definitely don't want to seem like I'm judgy. I said I like reality shows. There's My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding. I enjoy it. Please don't judge me. But Malcolm, what about you? Are there any reality shows that you like to watch?
Well, I want to say one thing, piggybacking off Desi's point, which is that I think there's something that, this is my lib hat, I'm going to put my lib hat, I'm not a Republican now, but there is often an overall message that a lot of these shows put out, which is about personal responsibility, and that like people, these tenants who are being evicted, they did something wrong, they lost their jobs, they don't have money, so they deserve to get evicted. And there is no reference whatsoever to the larger societal issues. There's the problem is not with corporate America. The problem is not with the lack of the unequal distribution of wealth in this country. The problem is not with the fact that the government's not doing anything to give people jobs, get them back to work. It's these people's fault. You're a hoarder. There's something wrong with you, and now let's all laugh at you.
That's the bully aspect of it.
But in terms of reality shows that I like, my favorite is a show called Undercover Boss, which you may not have seen, but it's not that popular. But one thing that I really like about this show, which takes a CEO who goes undercover and works at factories or wherever in his own or her own company, it is the only place on TV that you see real working class American people depicted in their noble, going through their careers, doing their lives, leading their lives, and the nobility in work and how much pride they take in their work and how hard they work for no reward. Every week, the CEO hugs them and reveals who he is, and they hug them and says, thanks for all that you do, and they're like, nobody ever says thank you to me. Nobody ever says, you know, we appreciate the work that you do. And then they get like $20,000, and they act as though their world is just, you know, all their problems are fading away for very little money. And so the depiction of working class people in those circumstances is what I like about that show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Malcolm Fleschner overcompensating for the douchey comments he said earlier on the show. No, but I've actually seen that program and I love it, and you're totally right. It's one of the few examples of reality TV that is uplifting, and it shows you that you can have faith in humanity. Desi, what about you?
Well, actually, I like that History Channel program, How It's Made, which, you know, they'll show you minor things like how candy gets made.
I love that one.
Or here, really stupid, here's golf balls. How do they get made? So I like that. I also like the Amish in the City, which is about...
That's awesome.
It is, and again, it's to me, it's similar to what you're talking about. It's a window into the lives of ordinary Americans who may have extraordinary circumstances that they're working through, or even just, you know, getting through regular life. And it's sort of that getting to see people do really nice things, being really great people, and just a window onto that world.
Nice. And Lucas, who I don't think owns a television.
I do not, so I'm not.
You live reality.
Yes, I'm not going to be very good at this.
Oh, like
but,
GTL isn't your life. Come on, look at you.
I don't even know what GTL is. What else is GTL?
Gym, tanning.
Oh,
every day.
yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
it's a ritual.
Sorry.
No.
Well, I have hung out at our director of web outreach, or whatever his specific job is now, Tom Hanks' house, and I have watched My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding.
And it's
And I have
good,
to
isn't
admit,
it?
It's fairly amusing, yeah. And it's interesting to see that white trash does not just exist in the United States. It's and I know
It's
that's
That's good. That's you outlived me by being like, I don't even have a TV. You know, ding, I win.
All right, guys, let's take one more quick break. Welcome back to The Point. I just wanted to take a moment to thank our lovely panelists, Malcolm Fleschner, the senior producer of this show, who is playing the role of the conservative on today's panel because our conservative decided to flake.
Yeah, all the comments that I made that you referred to that were douchey before, those were all the Republican comments.
Yes.
Just so we're clear.
Malcolm is actually a lovely guy, so don't worry.
Just check my online profile, you'll know.
Desi Doyen, co-host of the Green News Report, and also Lucas Lilieholm, who is the producer of the Young Turks on Current TV and also a fill-in host on the Young Turks Online. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. And I also want to make sure that I thank our Point contributors, Jerry Springer. I never thought I would say that, by the way, in my life. Thank you, Jerry. And also Julie Spira, dating expert and online profile extraordinaire. All right, thank you so much for joining us, guys, and we will see you next week with another episode of The Point.